Evelyn Thompson had always believed that her marriage was built on trust and quiet understanding. For 15 years, she and her husband Mark had lived what everyone around them called a stable, enviable life. They owned a cozy home in Seattle, had good jobs, and shared a comfortable rhythm. Morning coffee together, weekend grocery trips, quiet dinners. But lately, something invisible had started growing between them. It wasn't anger or betrayal, it was emptiness. The kind that seeps into conversations until they shrink into small talk and silence. Evelyn noticed the change before Mark ever mentioned it. He had grown distant, thoughtful, spending long hours at his home office. Sometimes she'd walk by and see him staring at their wedding photo on the shelf. It's the one where she was laughing in her white dress and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Now, that look was gone. One chilly evening, while folding laundry, Evelyn caught him standing by the window, lost in thought. "Mark," she said softly, "is everything okay?" He turned, surprised by her question, and gave a tired smile. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" She pressed gently. There was a pause before he said, "Do you ever feel like we stopped living for ourselves? Like we got too busy being married that we forgot how to feel alive?" The question hit her harder than she expected. Evelyn set down the laundry basket, trying to read his face. "Are you unhappy?" He shook his head. "Not unhappy, just missing something. I don't even know what that night." Evelyn couldn't sleep. His words stayed with her, echoing in the quiet of their bedroom. She lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if all marriages eventually came to this quiet companionship without spark. She remembered when they first met, how alive they'd felt together. She remembered the way Mark used to surprise her with little things. A drive by the lake, a song he said reminded him of her. Somewhere along the line, all that had faded into routine. The next few days were uneventful, but the silence between them felt heavier. One evening, Mark came home earlier than usual. His face looked pale, his movements restless. Evelyn noticed immediately. "You look worried," she said. "Something happened at work." He hesitated, then pulled out a chair and sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something. And before I do, please know it's not bad. It's just personal." Evelyn felt her heart tighten. "Okay, go on." Mark took a deep breath. "I've had this wish, a thought I've never shared because I was afraid it would sound wrong. It's not about anyone else. It's about us." Her curiosity deepened. "What kind of wish?" He exhaled slowly, his eyes flicking down to his hands. "I've always wondered what it would feel like to see you the way someone else might. To see how others notice you, how beautiful you are. Sometimes I think I take you for granted because I see you every day. I wish I could step outside myself and look at you through another person's eyes just once." Evelyn froze, unsure how to respond. It wasn't what she expected to hear. His tone wasn't suggestive. It was almost wistful, filled with longing and guilt. "Mark," she said after a pause, "that's not something to be ashamed of. People have thoughts, curiosities. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong." But he already looked regretful. "I shouldn't have said it. It sounds selfish, doesn't it? Forget I mentioned it." He stood and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the weight of his words. That night, Evelyn sat by the window long after he'd gone to bed. His wish replayed in her mind again and again. It wasn't about infidelity. She knew that. It was about something deeper, something emotional. Mark wasn't looking for someone else. He was searching for the version of her he had once seen, the woman who made his heart race, who made him feel alive. And maybe, she realized, she missed that version of herself too. The next morning, Evelyn looked at her reflection in the mirror longer than usual. The lines around her eyes, the faint gray in her hair, the way her expression had grown serious with time, she saw them all. For years, she had poured her energy into her work, into keeping the home in order, into being dependable. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped feeling like the woman she used to be, confident, spontaneous, radiant. Later that evening, Mark found her cooking dinner, humming a tune she hadn't sung in years. He noticed something different, a spark in her eyes, a lightness in her tone. It made him smile, though he didn't know why. After dinner, Evelyn said quietly, "I've been thinking about what you said." Mark looked startled. "Evelyn, please." "You don't have to," she interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "No, listen. You were honest with me, and I respect that. Maybe we both stopped seeing each other the way we used to. Maybe we forgot how to appreciate what we have." He blinked, unsure where she was going. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she continued, "that maybe it's time to bring back the part of us that got lost. Maybe it's time to remind each other who we fell in love with." Mark looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw both surprise and hope. He reached for her hand, holding it tighter than he had in months. "I'd like that," he whispered. That night they talked for hours, not about bills or schedules, but about memories, about how they met at a friend's barbecue, how he spilled coffee on her on their first date, how she laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. It was the first time in years that laughter filled their house again. But as the night deepened, Evelyn's thoughts grew more restless. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mark's wish was a doorway to something important, not about temptation, but about rediscovery. She wanted to surprise him, to make him see her differently again. Over the next few days, she changed small things. She wore her hair the way she used to when they were younger. She wore a scent he once said he loved. She caught him watching her sometimes with the same quiet wonder he had in their early years. And every time he looked away, she smiled, 'cause she could feel something in him waking up again. Still, there was something unresolved. His wish lingered in the air between them, an unfinished sentence neither had completed. One night, Evelyn decided it was time to give him what he didn't even realize he truly wanted, a chance to see her through new eyes. She planned a surprise, a weekend away, just the two of them. Somewhere quiet, somewhere far from their daily routines. Somewhere they could meet again, not as husband and wife, but as two people rediscovering each other. When she told Mark about the trip, his eyes softened with emotion. "You didn't have to do this," he said. She smiled gently. "I wanted to. You said you wanted to see me differently, Mark. Maybe it's time I show you who I still am." That night, after he fell asleep, Evelyn sat by the bedside, watching him breathe. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a wife trying to fix something broken. She felt like a woman again, strong, alive, and ready to write a new chapter of their love story. But deep down, she knew that once she fulfilled his wish, nothing between them would ever be the same again. Evelyn had everything planned. The following weekend, she and Mark would drive out to a quiet lakeside cabin a few hours from Seattle. She told him it was just a short getaway, a chance to unwind, disconnect, and maybe laugh like they used to. What she didn't tell him was that she had something deeper in mind, a way to help him see her again, not as the familiar wife he'd grown used to, but as the woman who once made his heart race. The morning of their trip, the sky was pale blue and the world seemed calm. Mark carried their bags to the car, glancing at her with quiet curiosity. "You've been smiling all week," he said, teasingly. "What's going on in that mind of yours?" Evelyn just smiled. "You'll see soon enough." The drive was peaceful. Trees lined both sides of the road, their leaves glowing gold and orange with autumn. For the first time in a long while, they talked, really talked. Not about work or chores, but about little things. Old road trips, silly fights, and dreams they used to share. The tension that had hung between them for months began to fade, replaced by something warmer and lighter. When they reached the cabin, Mark stopped in his tracks. The place was beautiful, wood-paneled, surrounded by tall pines, with a small dock stretching out into the still water. "This is incredible," he said softly. "How did you find it?" Evelyn laughed. "I used to come here with my parents when I was younger. It always felt peaceful. I thought it might be good for us." They unpacked, and for a while everything felt easy again. Mark built a fire in the small stone fireplace, and Evelyn prepared dinner. The smell of roasted vegetables and herbs filled the air. As they ate, Mark looked at her and said, "You seem different lately. Happier?" She smiled gently. "Maybe I'm just remembering how to be me again." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I missed that version of you. I missed us." The conversation grew quiet after that, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was calm, like they were finally breathing in the same rhythm again. After dinner, Evelyn poured them each a glass of wine, and they sat outside by the lake. The moonlight shimmered on the surface of the water, soft and silver. "Mark," she began softly, "do you remember that night you told me about your wish?" He tensed slightly. "Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I felt guilty afterward." "Don't," she said quickly. "You were honest? And I've been thinking about it. Maybe what you really meant wasn't about someone else. Maybe it was about wanting to feel something real again, something alive." He looked at her with quiet surprise. "That's exactly what I meant," he admitted. "I just didn't know how to explain it." Evelyn took a deep breath. "Then maybe it's time to stop feeling guilty for being human. We both changed over the years. We got busy, we got tired, but that doesn't mean we can't find what we lost." Mark reached for her hand. "You always understand me better than I understand myself," he whispered. She smiled, though her heart was trembling. "Maybe that's why we're here, to remember." The next morning, Evelyn woke early. She slipped out quietly, leaving Mark asleep, and walked down to the dock. The air was cool and smelled of pine. She stood there watching the sunrise paint the lake in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in years, she felt at peace with herself. When Mark joined her, he carried 2 mugs of coffee. "You're up early," he said, handing her one. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Too many thoughts," he chuckled. "Good ones, I hope." She turned to him, smiling faintly. "I was thinking about us, how far we've come, how much we've forgotten. I realized something important, Mark. We can't go back to who we were, but we can start again." Mark looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening. "You mean that?" She nodded. "I do. But starting again means we both have to be honest, completely." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "There's something I never told you," he said quietly. "Nothing bad, just something I've kept inside." Her heart tightened. "What is it?" He looked out at the lake. "Sometimes I wonder if I became too careful with you. Like I was afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. I stopped being spontaneous. I stopped showing you how much you mean to me because I thought routine was enough. But it wasn't." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. "You didn't fail me, Mark. You just stopped seeing yourself as the man I fell in love with. The one who made me feel like the world was full of surprises." He smiled faintly. "You really did know how to see the best in me." "Then show me that man again," she said quietly. "Not because you owe me anything, but because I want to see him too." That afternoon, they decided to take a walk through the woods nearby. The air was crisp, and the ground was covered in golden leaves. As they walked, they talked about the future, things they hadn't discussed in years. Not plans or responsibilities, but hopes. Mark spoke about wanting to travel more, maybe take time off work. Evelyn talked about painting again, something she had given up after their wedding. By the time they returned to the cabin, the sun was setting. The fire crackled inside, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke. Mark took her hand and said softly, "Thank you for bringing me here. I didn't realize how much we needed this." Evelyn smiled, her heart full. Sometimes we just have to step out of our lives to see what we were missing. They sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. Mark looked at her with a kind of wonder she hadn't seen in years. "You're different," he said quietly. "It's like you've come back to life." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes gentle. "Maybe I just needed to remember that I'm more than what life made me. And maybe you needed to see that too." The warmth between them was no longer distant. It was real, pulsing with something deeper. They talked late into the night, sharing stories they hadn't told before, fears, regrets, and small joys. It wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful in its simplicity. They were 2 people learning to understand each other all over again. But as the hours passed, Evelyn noticed something shifting in Mark's expression. He looked almost guilty, as if something inside him had broken open. Finally, he said, "Evelyn, there's something else I need to tell you." "I didn't realize it until now." She turned toward him, heart pounding. "What is it?" He hesitated, then whispered, "You gave me everything I could ever ask for. But when you agreed to come here, when you started changing, smiling, glowing again, it made me realize how much I'd lost touch with myself, too. I've been living like a shadow, afraid to admit I was unhappy." Evelyn reached for his hand. "You don't need to feel guilty for that. We both drifted apart, but that doesn't mean it's over. It just means we have to find our way back." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "You've already started that journey. You brought life back into us. I just don't know if I deserve it." Okay. She squeezed his hand gently. "You do, Mark? You always did." For a long moment, they just sat there, staring at the fire. There was no need for more words. The air between them felt lighter, cleaner, like a wound beginning to heal. As the firelight flickered across his face, Evelyn realized something profound. This wasn't about a wish anymore. It wasn't about being seen by someone else. It was about seeing each other again truthfully, without the layers of time and comfort that had dulled their love that night. As they stood by the window watching the stars, Evelyn said softly, "Do you remember what you told me? That you wanted to see me through someone else's eyes?" Mark smiled faintly. "I do." "Well," she whispered, "you just did. You looked at me like you did the first time we met." He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "And you looked at me like you still believed in us." They stood there for a long time, the quiet lake shimmering under the moonlight. It wasn't a grand or dramatic moment. It was gentle, like a quiet promise. Evelyn knew that whatever came next, they had already taken the first step toward rebuilding what they once had. But deep inside, she also knew something else. Every change comes with a cost. And while she had given Mark exactly what he needed, she wasn't sure he was ready for what that truly meant. When Evelyn and Mark returned from the cabin, life felt both familiar and new. The city lights, the hum of traffic, even the scent of rain on the pavement, everything seemed sharper, clearer, as if they were seeing it for the first time. But underneath that sense of renewal, Evelyn felt something stirring. The peace they found by the lake had brought them closer, yes. But it had also awakened emotions that had long been buried. For the first few days they lived quietly. Mark went back to work, and Evelyn resumed her small projects at home. Yet their conversations were warmer now. He'd text her during lunch breaks, send little jokes, or ask how her day was going. It reminded her of the early years of their marriage. She smiled more, laughed easily, and felt lighter. But one evening, she noticed something in his eyes, something restless. They were sitting in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp between them. Mark seemed distracted, running his hand through his hair. "You've been quiet lately," Evelyn said gently. He hesitated before replying. "I can't stop thinking about that weekend. About what we said, about my wish." Evelyn tensed slightly, but kept her tone calm. "What about it?" He leaned forward. "It made me realize how far we drifted and how much of that was my fault. But it also made me realize something else, that we never really talked about what we both wanted. I told you my wish, but I never asked about yours." Evelyn looked at him, surprised. "My wish." He nodded. "You've always carried everything for us, our home, our peace, even our happiness. I never asked what you needed." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No one had asked her that in years. She stared at the flickering lamplight. "I suppose my wish is simple," she said finally. "I want honesty. I want to feel like we're both awake in our lives again. I don't want to just exist beside you. I want to live with you." Mark's expression softened. "That's what I want too." But as the night went on, Evelyn sensed a quiet struggle inside him. He was trying, truly trying, but something still held him back. His affection was genuine, but it carried a weight, as if guilt and longing were tangled inside him. She decided not to push. Some things needed time. A week later, Evelyn got a call from an old friend, Claire, who invited her to help with a local art exhibition. It was something she used to love, but had stopped doing years ago. Mark encouraged her to go. "It'll be good for you," he said with a smile. "You light up when you talk about art." She agreed. And for the first time in years, she felt alive doing something for herself. The people she met were kind, creative, and full of life. It reminded her of who she had been before marriage had become mostly routine. One evening, after helping set up the gallery, she returned home late. Mark was sitting on the couch, his shirt sleeves rolled up, staring at the dark window. "You're home late?" he said quietly. "I lost track of time," she said with a smile. "The exhibit is coming together beautifully." He nodded, but didn't smile back. "You looked happy when you talked about it earlier." "I was," she said softly. It felt good to be part of something again. Mark looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "You know, I realized something while you were gone. When I made that wish months ago, that secret one, it wasn't really about wanting something new. It was about wanting you to come alive again. And now that you have, I feel like I'm standing still." Evelyn walked closer. "You're not standing still, Mark. You're just afraid of what change might bring. But change doesn't mean loss." He sighed, looking down. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she admitted. "But it's worth it." For a few weeks, things went on like that, quiet but uncertain. Evelyn noticed how Mark would sometimes watch her when he thought she wasn't looking, as if trying to read her thoughts. He was proud of her, but also unsettled. Like her new light reminded him of the time he had wasted. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Mark came home earlier than usual. Evelyn was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. He walked in, looking serious but calm. "Evelyn," he said, "can we talk?" "Of course," she said, turning off the stove. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said that night about the wish. I told you I wanted something exciting, something different. But the truth is, that wish wasn't about desire. It was about fear. I was afraid we'd lost each other for good. I thought maybe trying something new would save us. But that was wrong. What saved us was you saying yes not to my wish, but to rebuilding us." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Mark," he shook his head, his voice trembling. "I don't deserve how patient you've been. You gave me grace when I didn't earn it. And that changed me." She felt tears forming, but held them back. "That's what love is, Mark. It's not always passion or perfection. Sometimes it's quiet forgiveness." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I just hope I can give that back to you now." That evening, they sat together without speaking much. The air between them was heavy, but full of unspoken emotion. Regret, gratitude, hope. Evelyn knew that what they were building now wasn't just about romance. It was about truth. Over the next few months, life settled into a new rhythm. They made small changes, weekly walks, no phones at dinner, more time talking and less pretending everything was fine. Evelyn started painting again, setting up a small studio in the spare room. Mark began volunteering at a local community center on weekends. Both of them were learning how to live differently, slower, more intentional. But love, even when reborn, is never simple. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Mark said quietly, "You know, when I first made that wish, I thought it would break us. Instead, it broke me, and maybe that's what I needed." Evelyn looked at him, understanding. "Sometimes we have to fall apart to rebuild the right way." He smiled softly. "You sound like you've done this before." She laughed faintly. "Maybe in another lifetime." They stood there for a moment, side by side, in the quiet glow of their kitchen. There were no grand gestures, no perfect words, just the steady pulse of two hearts learning how to beat together again. Weeks later, Evelyn's art exhibition opened. Mark was there, standing proudly by her side, introducing her to people, admiring her work with genuine awe. After the event, as they walked to the car, he turned to her and said, "You've become someone I admire. I don't just love you, Evelyn. I respect you." She smiled, tears filling her eyes. "That's all I ever wanted, for us to see each other clearly again." That night, as they drove home under a quiet, starlit sky, Evelyn thought about how far they'd come. Their love wasn't perfect, and maybe it never would be. But it was honest now, fragile but real. And sometimes that was enough. In the following weeks, Mark surprised her with small gestures, breakfast in bed. Old love notes he had kept, little reminders that he was still trying. And Evelyn, in turn, met him halfway. They were no longer just husband and wife. They were two individuals learning to love with awareness. It's not expectation. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from their porch, Mark said softly, "Do you ever think about that wish anymore?" Evelyn smiled. "Sometimes, but now it feels like it was never really about what you wanted. It was about what we needed." He nodded. "And what did we need?" She leaned her head on his shoulder. "To start again, not as who we were, but as who we've become." The last rays of sunlight bathed them in a golden glow. Mark took her hand, holding it tightly, as if anchoring himself in that moment. "I guess you were my real wish all along," he whispered. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his words sink in. Life had tested them, but love, quiet, patient love, had found its way back. And that, she realized, was the kind of ending most people never get.